I'd like to call the July work session for the Riley Purgatory Bluff Creek Watershed District Board of Managers to order. This meeting's going to be held in person and public while recognizing a manager may, based on the advice from a healthcare professional, have a legitimate reason for not attending the meeting in a public place or person. So now that we've called it to order, I'd like to have a roll call. Terry, could you do the roll call for us, please?
Yes. Manager Crafton.
Present.
Manager DeVell.
Present.
Manager Cook.
Present.
Manager Ziegler.
Present.
President Pedersen.
Present.
All present.
Thank you much. Next, we're on to the approval of the agenda. May I have a motion, please?
I'll move the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Manager Crafton.
I'll second.
Thank you, Manager Ziegler. I believe we can proceed with the agenda.
Unless there's comments.
Madam President,
Yes, Manager Cook.
so could somebody tell me when the two items that looks like to me just showed up on the website, when they were posted?
This afternoon.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's proceed with item 3, which is the review of the 2025 proposed draft budget and levy.
We've got the vote for approval of agenda.
Oh, yes, excuse me.
For approval
Please.
of agenda as submitted, Manager Crafton.
Yes.
Manager DeVell.
Yes.
Manager Cook.
Yes,
Manager Ziegler.
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
5-0.
Now we can proceed with the proposed 2025 draft budget and levy. Mr. Jeffrey.
President Pedersen, managers, I will share my screen here and begin the presentation. Again, this is preliminary draft budget. We will be having a public hearing at the September meeting. It needs to be to the county auditors by September 15th. We will have another meeting between now and then, so if managers have comments tonight or things they would like to see adjusted to this budget, we certainly can make those adjustments with plenty of time to spare. So first I'd like to just start. Well, make it go to my next slide. Okay. Just a recap from the 2017 plan and the CIP projects. We had 23 projects that rated 30 points or higher in our implementation. Of those, 13 have been completed, 3 are in process, and 3 are lacking rights. So we were able to get 19 of the 23 are accounted for. The ones that are not accounted for are Purgatory Creek. There is a section of Purgatory Creek yet to be done. That is south of the preserve, the rec area, as well as a portion of Bluff Creek, couple of portions of Bluff Creek. And we can carry those forward in the next plan. As of the end of last year, this does not include the numbers for this year thus far. $7.4 million has been spent on these capital projects. With an estimated removal of 2.6 million pounds of total suspended solids and another 1,600 pounds of total phosphorus. This is on an annual basis from these projects. So in putting this together, this budget, Engineer Sobiek and I and others working on it had a few objectives and assumptions in mind. First, we are going to need to start the next generation plan. At this time, the things that we are budgeting for our completion of updating our UAAs, the Youth Sustainability Assessments, public outreach, community comment, stakeholder comment, as well as strategic planning with the board. So that will be the objectives for 25 in moving forward this plan. Second, in 2025, we will be finishing the Duck Lake Road partnership with Eden Prairie. So budget for that for one last year. We have the 3 capital projects. Actually, it's 4 if we count Kerber Ravine that we are programming for. So it's Upper Riley, Upper Bluff, North Lotus Lake, and Kerber Ravine. There is also alum treatment of Lotus that will be done this year, Next year will be an alum treatment of Rice Marsh Lake, and we are going to work with the city of Eden Prairie. They would like to do an alum treatment of Round Lake. We are proposing to maintain the current staffing level, not add staff at this time with salary adjustments. Cover the Spring Road planning expenses. So in addition to covering the debt service on the contract for deed, we budgeted for also being able to retain an architect and do any preliminary planning for restoration. Maintain adequate reserves to basically to keep our lights on. And that is when we get into the budget more, this is really where the managers, I think, have a lot of latitude in what it is that you want to do so that we're adjusting our requested levy for this year. Keep the levy as low as possible. And all of this budget, keep in mind, has been done under the assumption that we do not receive grant dollars. We have applied for the Lessard Sam's Outdoor Heritage Council, that's $3 million. Engineer Sobiak, myself, and other staff members are applying for several Bowser grants through the Clean Water Fund. So that would be additional revenues that are currently not considered in this budget because we frankly don't know if we will be awarded those. So, and this slide will show up again at the end of this presentation, but just kind of an overview snapshot of the proposed 2025 budget and levy. So we're proposing a levy right now of 4.25 million. Beginning of next year, we expect to have $4,013,000 cash on hand. So this is our current year levy, current year cash on hand, minus anticipated expenses. That is the cash on hand we expect to have. Other revenue for 25 is $429,000. This will be permit fees, grant applications, partner funds. I think that's pretty much it for our other. Investment. What? Investment. Oh yeah, that's the big one. Investment. Thank you, Engineer Sobiak. So total, whatever you want to call it, assets, cash on hand, revenue coming in, 8.7 million. In the budget, we have budgeted for $6.4 million in expenses, leaving us with reserves at the end of the year of 2.3 million. This would cover our costs of all of the administrative costs, as well as the payment to the city of Eden Prairie and the interest payments on the contract for deed. Okay, so an overview of 2024. We had a 2024 budget of 4 million. So we already 2 million increase in the budget itself. But we are looking at a 5% increase in levy right now with this budget as being proposed. 2024, the numbers on the left are what we budgeted or what we anticipated to come in. The numbers on the right are as of May 31st, what have we received thus far. So we've got roughly half of what we thought for revenues have come in. I would like to point out that partner funds, that funding, a vast majority of that would be the city of Chanhassen, their portion of the Riley Creek project. So with a change in scope on that, that number will change carrying forward, but it is accounted for in the budget.
Where is that?
Pardon?
Where exactly is that, what you just mentioned?
Oh, the 666,000 in partner funds.
Okay.
That's about, what was it? 600,000 was the city of Chanhassen.
Okay.
So giving us 5.2 million in the budget, 4.4 for cash on hand. We had total assets at the beginning of 24 of 9.6 million. Our budget was, as I said earlier, budget was 4 million. So proposed 25 revenue would be an implementation levy of 4.25 million. So this current year, increasing to 4.249 or a 5% increase if we go with this budget as proposed. Permit income, 110,000. Grant income, again, these the grants that are in here are the ones that we have been consistently getting, and that is for lake vegetation implementation management. I didn't put any of the other grants applied for into this budget. Investment income, we've been getting roughly 30,000 a month in interest we've been making. So estimating 250,000, given whatever happens to the economy, rather underestimate than overestimate it. Reimbursement, 65,000. Those are from projects that are out there that we're still owed money. So revenue, 4.7. Cash on hand, again, the 24 revenues plus the 24 cash on hand, less the 24 expenses, leaves us with 4 million cash on hand or 8.7 million from which to put together this budget. So if we look at the so I've taken this and broken it into the different categories that are in our budget sheet. So we'll start with administrative budget. There are no significant changes in this budget as proposed. Staff is actually a 6% decrease in staff costs. The rest of it is remaining relatively static. Legal costs went down because hopefully we won't have a lot of the same things going on in 2025 that we have going on in 2024. We had several different lawsuits. So 1.7 million for the budget for administrative costs. District-wide expenses, 10-year management plan is one that we're pushing up because of what I talked about at the beginning, as well as the UAA updates. So that increase of about 580,000 is the UAA, the 10-year plan update, and the wetland management and groundwater conservation programs. Those are the ones that are coming up. So groundwater conservation program was to advance the wells so that we can understand the interaction between the ground and surface water. Wetland management, we had dropped it off last year. We did not levy anything for that. It will, I think, will play a big role as we look at the overall ecosystem health plan. So that coupled with the UAAs will really help us identify priority areas. So those are the changes. The opportunity projects, and we can talk about this more, but the opportunity projects are not really doing what they were intended to do. The reserves can serve that same purpose. The opportunity projects, even if we identified a project, we would still have to come and do a plan amendment. So I think it's just as easy to have those funds in reserve and then the board make a decision if this project warrants taking funds out of reserve to do. We could do it either way. It's 6 one, half dozen the other. Bluff Creek expenses. So Bluff Creek, the only expense, and you'll see that B5 by Galpin is over budget projected for this year. But wetland restoration at Pioneer is significantly under budget. There is really only another $15,000, maybe $30,000 worth of expenses in wetland restoration at Pioneer. That over budget on Bluff Creek is to do the culvert crossing. So that's what that's for. We originally budgeted to do engineering. Once we had that opportunity with the district or with the city. So that money has not been spent yet, but we're programming it as though it will be spent this year. Riley Creek expenses for 25. Really, we'll be doing the Rice Marsh Lake phosphorus in-lake phosphorus load control as we talked about. We've already levied 1.25 million. For the Upper Riley Creek, we'll need to levy another 1.2. That will finish the project off to substantial completion. Of course, there will be the ongoing maintenance and retainage that'll be going on. Then Lake Susan Park Pond is the other one that we are not budgeting for in 25. The $120,000 that is shown there will come out of other funds, but that is accounted for in the overall budget. Overview of the, wait, did I? Oh, where's Purgatory? Purgatory is missing.
Yeah,
All right. So Purgatory, I think all of you have this handy dandy sheet.
we do.
So Purgatory,
We're at the bottom.
yep. So Purgatory is at the bottom. And let me stop this and share that so that everybody at home can see what we're looking at. So we're looking at this bottom section here now. So the Purgatory Rec area still sits there. We're not going to levy any more funds for it. When we met with the Board of Water and Soil Resources and the City of Eden Prairie as part of the watershed-based implementation funding group, it was discussed using that at that time, using that funding in the future to do it, or tapping into some of the other grant programs to do that. But right now, it's just staying there as a placeholder for that until we can work out with the City of Eden Prairie who is actually going to take the lead on the project. As I said, we've got the Duck Lake Road Partnership. We'll finish that off this year. And we are slowing down, pumping the brakes on North Lotus Lake so that we can meet with stakeholders and really get some creative ideas in there and find a way to truly make it an amenity of the park, a destination for people rather than just a treatment device. So I'm going to go back to the slideshow. Sorry about that missing slide. But again, just to summarize it, we're proposing a levy of 4.25, which is a 5% levy increase. The total expenditures is 6.4 million. It would leave us with a cash reserve at the end of the year of 2.3 million roughly. That number there, the 2.3, if we were to adjust that down, we could bring the levy down. So that is what I have for presentation. I'm happy to answer questions or entertain thoughts or ideas that people have.
Madam Chair,
Manager Duval asked first. We'll be with you quickly.
So I wonder, Administrator Jeffrey, if you could expound a little bit on the Kerber Ravine. I guess I've not heard of that before.
Oops, Mr. Smith. Here, answer a call from Lewis. Swipe up. So the Kerber Ravine project, the city of Chanhassen came to Scott and I, Engineer Sobiek and I, about 5 years ago now. When we originally did the CRAS, it did not score very high, and they didn't understand why it did not. They provided us with some video, and we went out, Engineer Sobiek and I went out and walked it, and it is in desperate need of stabilization. It is delivering a tremendous amount of sediment to Lotus Lake. A feasibility study was done by BAR for it, and that has been completed. We will need to have a public hearing and order the project in order to include it into the plan. We would like to align it with the Frontier Trail project that the city of Chanhassen has proposed. It's to be determined if we would provide the plans to Chanhassen and they would do it with their project, or if we would do the project as part of the overall Lotus Lake watershed work.
Thank you.
Manager Cook, you have questions, comments?
I do, thank you. You know, just first of all, to follow up on that about the Kerber Ravine. Is that part of that run all the way down and then underneath Frontier and empty into Lotus Lake somewhere, what, a third of the way from the south end?
That is correct, Manager Cook. Yeah, there's a large lot. It's right on the 90-degree curve of Frontier Trail, and it goes into a really odd drainage system. There's a concrete, I don't know, we'll call it a stilling basin for lack of a better word, that's just about 40 feet off of the curb. And then it goes down into Lotus Lake right there. Yes.
And am I correct? Does a subdivision or whatever, does that own the land on either side, or does Chanhassen own it on either side of that creek?
So Chanhassen only owns some of it. Most of it is in private ownership. The residential lots go to the center of it. They have a drainage utility easement, but that's for their sanitary sewer that runs through there.
Okay, and so the estimate on the ravine, is that to just take care of the kind of the steep slope portion, or is that intended to cover all the way from the pond all the way down to the lake?
So the money that's currently allocated is just to work on design. But the project is intended to go from the trail of Kerber Pond, that
Right.
trail that's along the east side of Kerber Pond, to Frontier Trail. And then the city of Chanhassen would be responsible for redoing any storm sewer conveyance on the east side of the road through the lot. I have had a conversation with an individual who is related to the person who owns the lot, so there may be opportunity to actually do some practice on that lot, but I don't want to state that we will until I have, obviously have them on board with it.
Well, the reason I ask is I think that one of the issues with Lotus Lake, although this year, because of all the rain, it's a little clearer than it has been, and we haven't had our string of August 90 days, so it's a little clearer than typical. But it seems to me there's an awful lot of stormwater drainage into Lotus Lake on all sides. You mentioned the north side is an issue, but there's several locations on the west side, including this one about the ravine. And I think that, and obviously on the east side, but I believe the east side has some stormwater ponds built in already. I don't know if they're sufficient or not, but it seems to me that if we really want to clean up Lotus Lake, we need to pay attention to all of those stormwater, inputs, as well as those, what do you want to call them, creeks or ravines, et cetera. So that's my comment with respect to this project. And I think we need to look long-term about funding that, maybe particularly, well, obviously sooner rather than later.
Manager Cook, if I
Yes.
may, yeah. So, and I should have touched on this during my presentation. I apologize. So the Lotus Lake Watershed Improvement Project, which is right here, the LL1, LL3, LL7, LL8, that actually does look at, so there's the Frontier Lake Association lot that's further south on
Yep.
Frontier. That's one of the areas that's looked at in this. So yes, to your point, we're looking at all of those inputs along the west side of the lake, those ravines. And then we are also looking at the one that goes behind Bighorn Drive there, that channel.
Yeah, there's that one, and I think that's that, whatever you want to call it, creek, ravine, whatever it is. I believe there's a stormwater pond just on the east side of Kerber, if I'm not mistaken, and that outlets into that, again, ravine, whatever you want to call it, that goes down and
Yep.
empties into Lotus just north of Bighorn Drive.
Yep.
Okay, and that base, so we're in the same. So I just think as part of this planning, I think it's really important to try to do as complete a review and hopefully project, even if it's over several years, to try to really address all those issues, because even though one issue obviously will help, I think really to help get that lake, which seems to be kind of stubborn on being improved. I think we need to address more of those issues. So that's on that. But I wanted to go to one other thing here. Excuse me, I got to go back to the presentation if I can get it.
Oh, I can bring that up.
Excuse me.
Mhm.
So currently, in the money that has been allocated would be allocated under the proposed 2025 budget. Now, are those funds sufficient to take care of and I may have misunderstood your presentation, take care of the Upper Riley and the Bluff Creek?
President Pedersen, Manager Cook, no, at this time, the only project that will be fully funded after the 2025 will be the Upper Riley. So in essence, you can think that 1.2 that is currently allocated for Upper Riley, 1.2 million, will be re-levied again the following year to do Upper Bluff.
Okay, so that would be you're looking at that as an overall plan of being the subsequent year. Bluffer would be like 2026. We got 2025 for Upper Riley. Am I understanding you correctly?
That is correct, Manager Cook.
Okay. And then the other thing that and I have to go back to the plan again on Bluff Creek. You turn to that page again.
Yep.
Okay. So, okay. It seems to me, if I'm not mistaken, there are a number of significant issues on Bluff Creek. And just by my memory, it strikes me that I just get the impression that it's been neglected. I mean, not maybe intentionally, but what is the plan besides the Upper Bluff Creek? There are a number of other significant issues, which I think are kind of round out our top 30 or whatever it was, or top 20. So can you just refresh my recollection on what the plan is right now going forward to address those issues that we previously identified in Bluff Creek?
President Pedersen, Manager Cook. Well, one, I think you're buttering me up because Bluff Creek is kind of my favorite one, and I too feel that it gets neglected. So there is the portion of Bluff Creek that runs behind the Audubon Motive Complex that will need to get programmed in the 27, 28 era. Then there is the entire lower valley. And that one will be a much larger discussion with the board of how we want to take that. We know that Bluff Creek's impairment is a direct result of the near source ravines and gullies. There are 26, I think 26 escarpments and or ravines in the lower valley that are all contributing significant sediment to it. So the TMDL that was done in 2014, 15, that had an astronomical budget. So I'm really frightened to look at what it is now. But you are correct. We will need to start programming the rest of Bluff Creek 27 moving forward.
And again, I raised that up, like you said, moving forward, and particularly if it ends up extending into the next 10-year plan on that regard. But I'll just state, I believe that's just, again, as you said, been neglected, and it's I think a significant, I don't know about significance, the right word, not insignificant contributor to the load on the Minnesota, and I know everybody's trying to direct their attention to the Minnesota, but if I'm correct, I don't believe, and I could be wrong here, doesn't Bluff Creek go right into the river? It's got a little estuary, whereas is it Purgatory and Riley, do they empty into one of the lakes in the Minnesota river bottom? Am I right, or am I totally off base there?
No, you're right. So Bluff Creek drains into that large wetland complex that's on either side of the bridge, which is really the floodplain of the Minnesota River, whereas Purgatory and Riley drain into Grass or Rice Lake respectively.
Yeah, so, that's why I think it's important to try to address that Bluff Creek again sooner rather than later. And because we're talking about dollars, and we'll have the floor here. You mentioned about Ozark Sam's funding, and I thought you mentioned the amount 3 million.
That is
Did I
correct.
hear you right?
That is correct, yes.
So you applied, or we've applied for 3 million in funding?
That is correct, yes.
And is there a reason why we didn't apply for more, or?
To try and keep our match at 40%, that tends to be a number that agencies like to see for skin in the game.
So on that basis, there would, assuming that funding came through, there would still be some additional $3 million that would need to be expended if one was to complete the contract for deed, assuming the contract for deed is effective.
That
Is
is
that right?
correct. That is
Okay.
correct.
Thank you. That just wanted to make sure I was hearing that correctly. Okay, very good. I think you've answered my questions right now. Oh, one other point. I'm maybe a little confused here. You had at the end of 2024, we'd have about 2 million in cash or reserves, or was I misunderstanding this
No, I'm
whole thing?
President Pedersen, Manager Cook, I apologize. So that 2.5 million is how much of our revenue we have taken in as of May 31st this year.
Yeah, okay, that's basically half of our levy, is that right?
Yes,
Give
that
or
is,
take? Okay, and so we'd get the last of it. And so we would, but normally at least in the past, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, we have generally tried to have somewhere around 50% of the budget for the following year in cash on hand at the end of the year, because we only, I believe, get our share of revenues in like May or June of the following year. Am I correct?
correct. We get them in June of the following year. And yes, we've been trying to get there. We have not yet actually achieved that 50%. But yes, that would be, in an ideal world, that would be nice to get to.
Okay, so you're looking at this slide that you have up there, you're looking at is that a projection at year end of that 4 million? The one you were just on?
Oh, yep. Oops, where'd I go? Yes.
So is that kind of the projection where you think we would be at the end of the year?
Yes.
Okay,
That is-
and then could you flip up the next slide? Yeah, go there. Okay. And that cash on hand you are projecting, that would be on hand at the end of 2025.
That would be on hand at the beginning of 2025.
On the beginning of 2025 to fund.
Yep,
Okay,
so
basically
this,
first half revenues. Yep.
yep, so this is where it does get tricky because our cash on hand at the end of the year would only be 2.3 million, 2.29 million. If we,
Oh, yeah. On your projection for 2025. Yeah.
correct.
That's going to depend on what happens. So, if we attained funding, we would have, in your projections, how much are you again projecting being outlays for for the property in Hennepin?
The Spring Road property
Right.
outlay is $500,000.
Okay, you're projected at $500,000 through the term of the contract for deed.
Through the 2025 term of contract for deed, yes.
Okay, on that basis. And then if you've got that funding, is it anticipated that the $3 million funding would go toward any remaining obligation under that contract?
That is correct.
Okay. I think that's all I have right now. Thank you very much for your answers.
President Pedersen.
Yeah, Manager Crafton.
So one of the things that we keep bringing up is we keep talking about how our rules have been inadequate to deal with some of the things we discuss. And I had hoped that we would have a time to, and I think we need to do this. Obviously, we have to have a budget and we've got to get this done in order to get things in the right progression and sequence. But I think we need a retreat to bring us together to discuss some of the things that we have concerns about and some of our priorities based on comments that have been made by managers as we've progressed and things we see where there's some places that we need to build some consensus or at least hear from each other and set some priorities in terms of what our goals and objectives are.
Mr. Jeffrey.
President Pedersen, Manager Crafton, you are spot on. When I mentioned strategic planning, I just did it as a general umbrella, but really that's what I'm anticipating is the board getting together, saying these are priorities, these are objectives, this is where we see us going, these are the, what we would like to change in rules, what we'd like to change in our implementation of our capital project, et cetera. So that's what I mean by strategic planning.
So we get a key role in this?
Pardon?
So we get a key role in?
Yes, that's the whole
I'm
plan.
feeling a little left out, frankly.
That's the whole plan, because I want all of the managers to say, this is what we want to do, rather than each manager having their priorities. That way, we all know that this is where we're going. This is what we're doing.
So,
Great.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Manager Cook.
So just to follow up on that, Administrator Jeffrey, what you're saying is you're really looking at trying to start this 10-year plan revision, because that would be all part of it, right? I mean, reviewing the current goals, looking at, are they right for us? Do they need to be changed? Do they need to be added? Wouldn't this be all part of that process? It wouldn't necessarily be two different ones, because that wouldn't seem to make sense to me. It seemed to me this would be a continuing process leading up to hopefully the revised plan.
President Pedersen, Manager Cook, that is absolutely correct. That is the goal.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh,
So
Manager Ziegler.
the question I have is reserve number, the 2.3 million. That's substantially lower than we've had in prior years.
That is correct.
And I'm not sure if I understand, is that because we haven't received all our income yet? Or does that include us receiving the income?
This would be if we got all of our 25 income, and are you talking about the 24 cash on hand or the 25 cash on hand? The 2.3?
The 25 on your bigger chart,
Yep.
you've got it listed in the 2025 budget. That's the beginning of the year, I assume. Is that correct?
That is our anticipated expenditures for the year. So here's just a snapshot of it. That 2.3 cash on hand, that would be at the end of the year after getting all of our revenues, all of our using the cash on hand that we have. And if we spent our entire 6.4 million that we budgeted, this is what would remain with a 5% levy and the priorities we set for.
That does not include any grants or anything we may receive during that period of time,
That
correct?
is correct.
See, it doesn't include any of that money that we might get.
But if we,
might get.
Yes, we don't know.
But I think in prior years, we have done the same thing where, unless it's fairly secure that, there's preliminary approval or at least agreement in principle, we don't include it in our budget because, we don't know what we're going to get.
Correct. Spending
And
money we
in
don't
prior
have.
years, this 4 million to 5 million is what I remember being the reserve at the end of the year.
President Peters.
So
Manager Crafton.
So we've been trying to put a
Are we
little
gonna-
bit into the investment account. So I think some of what we've taken to do that, and we've tried to be very conservative in that, anticipating there might be needs, but, right? I mean,
our investment, President Pedersen, managers, our investment income may well be substantially higher as well, but I don't want to budget that it is and then find ourselves, we only got 2% or 1.5% or whatever.
but the cash on hand is reduced by the amounts we put into.
Actually, I am counting that in this.
Okay. all
So
right,
it
that's what I
is,
wasn't
it is
sure.
accounted for in this. So
It
a
seems
lot
like
of
we're
the
cutting.
reserves that we've had at the end of the year have been, a lot of it has been just projects that didn't move forward. So we've never been able to get to a point with a budget where we've spent all of the money we had budgeted and still had that 4 million reserves.
So, but am I correct in that we're making a much leaner reserve than we've had in the recent, say, 10 years?
You are correct.
But it's more, not so much that. I mean, the reserve is a consequence of the fact that we have all these plans and we're supposed to be spending the money and doing them. So if we haven't been doing that over the years, that's why we've had so much in the prior levies section that contributed to a bigger amount. I mean, that's my read on it. But we're trying to push some of these forward. So things that have been in the works for a long time, we've been designing feasibility studies. It's time to do them and get to pay for them. So
President
unless
Peder-
I'm wrong on that.
President Pedersen, managers,
Yes.
that really is the question before the managers tonight. Are there priorities that you think should be pushed off in order to maintain a larger reserve? Is the 5% levy the levy you want to go with? That's really the question before you. There are certain projects I think we have to move forward on, the Upper Riley. I think we have to move forward on. There are others, though, that we could certainly delay a year. Wells, the wetland program. So there are areas where we could tighten up our spending and have more in reserves.
So, Madam President,
Yes.
I'd like to hear, Manager, your response to that, because I don't think you were able to give your question as to what we're doing with that. It kind of got cut off. Right, and it seems clear to me that we're cutting ourselves much thinner reserves
Yes.
than we've had in the past. And I don't disagree, we need to do the projects. But at the beginning of the year, we thought we were going to do the other projects too, but we still had a projected reserve that was larger than what we're projecting now.
So President Pedersen, managers, if you remember when we set the budget with and without the land acquisition, we were showing a 9% levy increase for this year.
So Manager Ziegler, still curious as to what your thoughts are. You're sort of sounding like we're projecting optimistically that maybe we won't get that, so we should necessarily not be using that reserve. If I'm putting words in your mouth, or I guess it seems like to me that it would be good to look at, okay, what if we did increase from 5% to like 5.5? And if we did want to put off some of the projects or delay them a little bit, could we make this number a little better? Because, stuff happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in the past, we've had a nice cushion, like a year's worth of projects almost. But this, we're projecting, we're gonna run out of money based, just on staff costs, let alone projects. If bad stuff happens.
Oh, Madam President,
Yes, Manager Cook.
well, I have to go back and reiterate what I believe I understood Administrator Jeffrey state. The only reason we had the large reserves is because, at least in several of the past years, we have not done projects that we had otherwise scheduled. So we had a buildup. And that may be coloring some of the managers' views of what kind of a reserve we should have. We had this discussion several years ago, several times. The idea was to try to slowly increase the reserve only because, if my recollection was, the primary reason was to make sure that we had funds for projects that we were thinking about doing. And sometimes that would require some additional ones. But I believe our discussion was, at a minimum, we needed to have cash on hand at the end of the year that would hopefully cover the anticipated expenses of the following year up to the time we got our first payment on the real estate tax assessments. And so we've always, I think in actuality, we've always been in this situation of having this kind of cash carryover. It's just, I believe the past few years were anomalies in the sense that we did not do some projects we thought we were going to do. And we had, cash buildup. I mean, we had the issue during COVID, et cetera, about what do we do and not do. And, are we going to have funding, et cetera. So I think we were more, and rightfully so, cautious on that basis. There's nothing wrong with increasing it, but I think we're on the, we had our inflation, knock on wood, is coming down. Interest rates are coming down. True to norm, everything resorts to the mean. So although it would be great to maybe consider increasing it, I think it's premature to say we're going to increase it this year without having done a better job of looking at what does the next 10 years bring, or the remaining, or 10 years from now. And obviously there'll be another, 3 years to add on to that when we ultimately do the revised 10-year plan. But I'm not in favor of, increasing the levy, by that amount. I think 5% is a good number. We had these discussions all the way back when Mr. Ward was on the board. In order to be good stewards for our money, I think we have to watch it. And sometimes it's going to take us longer to do some projects, but I think 5% is a good number. I think Administrator Jeffrey's done a good job laying out a plan. But I will say this, that everybody knows the existence of the lawsuit, and we got $500,000 and more. You're looking in legal fees and other things that we could have had in our reserve, rather than spending that money to try and buy a piece of property, which, as my position is, it is not within our authority to go purchase that piece of property. So I think you got to take, you managers other than myself made this leap about spending an extraordinary amount of money, okay, on the purchase of a piece of property, which has no water features, money that we could be using for the really significant issues we have, which is Bluff Creek, Upper Riley. And, I'll give you the issue about, drilling wells, which you already know my position on that, that's an issue that's already, come and gone, and there's already data out there. I think we're probably misspending money on that. But if you really want to cut something, should have considered not buying that piece of property. That would be another $500,000 in the pot, okay, at the end of this year. would be a total of $1 million at the end of 2025. So I don't think we should be in a position of raising any type of levy. I think Administrator Jeffries laid out a good plan, and we should stick with it, at least until we've done a better job of looking forward for the next 10 years. I
Thank you.
Thank you.
President, I
Yeah.
would like to finish my discussion here. What I'd like to see is, okay, let's take the last 10 years, what we projected, and compare it to what we're projecting now. And you'll see that it's a huge difference. And the problem is not that we didn't do projects, because it was what we were projecting at the beginning. We might have ended up with a little more than we thought left over in the reserves, but we didn't project such a low number. And it seems like, okay, it's still positive number, right? But do we have a plan for the next year to try and get it back up? And as Manager Cook said, every year it got bigger, right? But it didn't get bigger by plan. It got bigger because of projects we didn't do. But now we're planning to do these projects, and we're planning to cut our reserves thin. And it is partly because of the land purchase, but that's a $500,000 of it, right? We're cutting it down by 2 million. That's 3 times what the property would have cost. So it seems like we're putting ourselves in a hole. And, I'm not sure why we're doing it.
So President Pedersen, managers, what you see on the screen, this was 23 cash on hand, was 3 million. So we've never made it to half.
If you subtract the past levies out of the total, what do you get? Is that the 4?
So,
Madam President?
Manager Duval asked first.
so
Okay.
Manager Ziegler, so can you follow on with what you think? I mean, you've stated the problem, but so what are your thoughts on where we should be looking? If you kind of stated the problem going forward, and it looks like our reserves are lower. So what are you thinking?
So what I'm thinking is, when I look at company annual reports, they show every year together, and you can see what's happening, right? Year over year. And I think we need to do that and decide, is this okay? Or is this a problem? And that's all I'm saying. I don't know the answer. One thing would be to increase the levy. Another thing would be plan to do less projects. There's different things you can do. But, if we were a corporation and our income was going down, we'd shrink the company accordingly, do less stuff, lower our costs. So we need to have all the information in front of us to do this, to make sure we're not digging a hole.
So just to follow up again, it seems like you're implying that we're down to 2.5 million, but maybe we should continue to stay at the 4 million level? Or we don't know yet?
Well, I think we have to decide that, but we have to know, we have to plan, is this going to be a low year and we're going to get back up? Or is this low number acceptable long-term? It seems like in past administrations and all through the time I've been involved, we've always had that 4 to 5 million
We have not.
reserve.
We have
Yeah.
not. We've never.
Madam
had.
President?
Yes.
I believe it. Well, first of all, I don't disagree. If Administrator Jeffrey can put together the information over time, so we have the data before us, but we're not speculating. I happen to think that Administrator Jeffrey is right in his description of, why we had the reserves when we did them, but if he could put it together, the accountants put together, comparison year by year, I think we'll see that we didn't do some projects. If that's not true, then we'll see whatever the facts are. And, as managers can make, decisions regarding whatever those facts are and where we want to be.
So, my recollection is that, like, Mr. Jeffrey said, we've not really been at that 4 million mark. I think that's been very kind of exaggerated because of the plans we thought we had and we're going to go in that year and never went in. And we've just been carrying forward and like an extra million to $1.5 million every year. And I've always thought to myself, why are we carrying such a large amount when it's really not the amount we're carrying? It's because we thought we were going to do such and such a project and it cost this much money and we kind of never got to it. That's my recollection. And I might be wrong. The only way we can really see that is if Terry puts or has the accountant put something together for us. Maybe for the next board meeting, you could bring that for us.
Well, this is what I'm pulling up right now. So in 22, cash on hand was 3.3.
So is that the projected cash on hand from 2021? Or is that
From
the end of
2022.
year?
That's the projected from 2021, or from 2022. Yep. And then this was the projected for 2023 from 2022.
3.1. I think we've always been just like $1 million to $1.5 million off really for what we really have thought we had, but we didn't really have because we were planning on a project that was going to take that money.
Well, I guess I'd like to see it with the projections from the beginning of the year and where we ended at the end of the year for each year so that we can compare apples and apples rather than,
President.
Yes, Major Crafton.
So Manager DeVal's been asking a lot of good questions about what should be on the balance sheet as opposed to on the P&L, so to speak. So statement of activity. So I think that's part of this discussion is that some things should have been assets as far as we had planned to do these projects. This is what was planned. And that's what, and it gave Abdo a heartburn when I saw what we were doing too. So, sorry.
Madam President?
Something we should look
Oh,
at
I'm sorry.
maybe within the finance committee too, in terms of the discussion that's been going on as to how we are actually reflecting things and some of the questions that have come up in those meetings. So I think that would inform the discussion and help Manager Ziegler because, I mean, your questions are good. I mean, they're right on.
Yeah,
It has appeared that way, but they are projects that we thought we were going to do and we just didn't do.
I remember having this discussion with Claire Strumman, or Claire at the very beginning, and I said,
Laser.
this isn't really a reflective number to what we actually have. And she said, well, this is just the way we do it. That was the response I got,
The main thing,
which isn't really an answer, but.
the main thing is that we can cover staff costs and any projects that we deem to be really important. And as long as.
Madam President,
Yes, are you done, Manager Crafton?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Manager Cook.
I'll just go back to say, I think Manager Ziegler has a good point, and I think it's particularly pertinent to going forward and planning for the next remaining years of this 10-year plan and going into the future to know what has happened in the past, why the numbers were where they were, so that you have a good feel of what's the history and what's the reason behind the history. So whoever the managers are can make an informed decision, going forward. And like I said, not only for the remainder of this current 10-year plan, but the next 10-year plan. So I think it would be a good idea to have that analysis done so that it can be taken into account in deciding not only 2025, but 6, 7, and then the next 10 years. So I rest.
So, with the manager's consensus, perhaps we'll ask for this to be on the August board meeting with a comparison of how many years do you think we should be looking at?
At
10?
least 5.
5, at least 5?
It might be good from like this
We're sorry.
10-year
Going
plan.
back before me is going to be very difficult. As you all
Okay.
pointed out, some of
Do
the
the
reasons,
best
but-
you can.
In the audit.
Yeah,
right?
we'll pull the audit parts
Okay.
and see what we come up with.
I think the consensus what I think is looking at what you've got is, okay, this is a good place for us to start. We at least know we'd have this and kind of cover everything. Perhaps we need to look at where the comparisons are. Do we need to pop it up just 1% or 0.5% or something in order to be able to cover it if we need more reserve? Does everybody agree that
So
that's?
when's the deadline for?
15th of September, it has to go into the state, so the public hearing needs to be in the month of September. So we'd still have August in order to be able to talk about it.
And decide whether we want to up
Right.
the.
Right, does everybody agree there?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay,
All right.
all right. So I believe that brings us to the end of the proposed draft budget and levy, which brings us to the discussion of the proposed resolutions for the Minnesota Watersheds 25 legislative platform.
President Pedersen, managers, at our last meeting, we asked to brainstorm if anybody had any thoughts of resolutions that they would like to put forward to Minnesota watersheds. I have given some thought to it. I do like Manager Crafton's idea that she proposed of having watershed be an actual TEP member on the Wetland Conservation Act Technical Evaluation Panel. The other thing I have thought about, and I would like to put forward to the managers, as we continue to lose small town newspapers, notification is becoming difficult, to say the least. How do we reach those audience? I don't have an answer what I would propose as a resolution, but I would like to maybe hear people's thoughts if there's something we can do. Obviously we've got our listserv and our mailing, but that only reaches those who choose to be a part of it. So, we can go with the Minneapolis Star Tribune. It's an elevated cost. And still not guaranteed it's going to reach anyone anymore. In conversations with the Patriot and what's the other one?
Suburban.
Yeah. They are going to offer the readership throughout our district. Whether or not people do, I don't know. And my understanding is they're starting to charge now for those
$35 a year.
Yeah.
For
Oh.
getting that, yes.
So that's my only other thought is even if we don't have something to bring forward to Minnesota watersheds, it's something we definitely need to, as an organization, think about how we're going to comply and how we're going to reach.
Madam
Yes.
President,
Yes.
I think this is a problem for all watersheds. And I think that one way to address it would be to, evaluate the law as it stands. What does it mean that it has to be posted? And maybe get a clarification that if it's posted on a public website, such as our website, then that could be adequate. And we wouldn't have to do printed publications, because it's a problem for every watershed. They've all got the issue and they're doing it different ways. And, we've at least had pretty good newspapers. Some of the smaller towns, they don't, they have less. So,
I think it's not just a problem now, but it's going to continue to be a worse problem because fewer and fewer people are actually reading a paper newspaper. And really, when you get to the back of them, is anybody really spending a whole lot of time looking at all of that? There's got to be another way of doing this online somehow. And maybe we just need to say, someone needs to investigate what could actually be done as an alternative. Could we submit it to our cities that are part of our district, and they have a list of whatever? Do we get the entire data set from Hennepin County, our portion of Carver County, and we have to email it to everybody? Somehow we've got to come up with some other method, because this is not, it's not sustainable in the future. It's just not going to happen.
President?
Yes.
So two comments. One is, I think your comment about the cities is a good one, because I live in Minnetonka and I get emails and I get publications in the mail. They send it out to the local people who are residents of the city. So that might be one immediate source, is to actually target the city mailing list and go directly to the city is what we're doing. I mean, it's a good publication, and it's almost like it's filling a niche in the void of the lack of newspapers, and they're starting to incorporate other things. So that might be a good avenue. And the other question I would have is, with Minnesota watersheds, if that shouldn't be part of the annual questionnaire that they send out when they're doing surveys to see what the rest of the state is doing, because there are probably other approaches in different parts of the state that might make sense. So a combination of the two would fulfill the fact that the historical local print news media for local areas is shrinking. It's all based on advertising revenue, which isn't there anymore. So it continues to go down. But the city is not advertising, so they publish it, and I get publications all the time from Minnetonka.
But they're electronic, aren't they?
No, in the mail,
Really?
mail.
Wilmington too, the briefing.
We get briefings of everything that's going on in the city, from everything, from the politics to the events and that might be something that we look into to see
In the county also.
we hit the major cities in our watershed.
Yeah, see, I get stuff from Hennepin County,
Yeah, that might be another.
so
thing.
that
Get
might be
their-
another.
Same thing
Option.
there. Yep.
And what about sending out like a postcard sometime at the beginning of the year or something to say, please look in these different places for more information so that you can stay.
At least we could do is come up with some resolution.
Yeah.
To send forward and see whether or not they can, and because we're not like you say, we're not the only ones. This is going to be a problem.
The other thing is that the drainage authorities within watershed districts are having the same problem.
Yeah.
So there's been litigation, et cetera, and so they've been putting out proposals of ways that they can be more visible and more transparent, and using their website's one of them, but I think there are other ideas that are coming up. You should ask Jan White about that, because she'd be directly seeing those.
Miss Jeffrey, did you have a comment?
No, but I believe Manager Cook was trying to.
Manager Cook?
Yes, thank you. Well, and as you've already said, it's not only an issue for us, but all watersheds, but actually all governments that are required to publish notice. I'm not sure it's going to be successful in changing it. Maybe the best we could hope for is getting the legislature to approve some type of alternative, because, for hundreds of years, well, I don't know, hundreds, but 100 years, all notice has been published in papers and people have had to pay for them. I mean, it's really only a recent that actually some of these local newspapers were given away. So, I think the public runs the risk, of not being informed if they don't want to sign up. And, I think most of these papers that are going electronic, they'll even require you in the future to sign unless they think they have sufficient revenue. So I think that maybe a proposal for the legislature would be to allow publication in electronic newspapers, or newspapers that only have electronic circulation, or maybe some type of provision where an entity such as ourselves, like Manager Crafton suggested, maybe you get send out a postcard and say, our information is published here, and there may be a cost, or you sign up and we will send you a notice on everything, and here's where to sign up. So maybe we'll have two avenues, but you're right, it is an issue. And as you said before, it's going to get worse, but I don't think it's going to go away. I mean, people should be getting more notices, not less notices, and spending $35, I guess, is nothing compared to spending, I think, whatever it is, 100 and some bucks for the Star Tribune. But that may end up being everything, Star Tribune. We have Finance and Commerce used to be the place where, a lot of cities, companies, et cetera, published all their legal notices. But, who goes and buys it or gets it was another. I mean, that's how I started out, by drafting notices to stick in Finance and Commerce. But I'm not sure that's a viable alternative. So I think some type of proposed resolution to provide for electronic newspaper, electronic notices in lieu of or in addition to published notices would be a good resolution to have.
Okay, does that give you some where to go to?
No, I
Yes.
can pull something together that, we can work with Mr. Smith to pull something together on that. Otherwise, are there any other? I don't
Anything
have.
else?
9 Mile does, and Minnehaha Creek, in terms of their, how are they?
Yeah, I mean, we have plenty of ways that we get information out. It's being compliant with the notification laws.
So that's what we're suggesting, is that we need to redo that, have a resolution to
Yeah.
address it.
Yep.
Okay.
Right. Okay, anybody else have any other ideas for Minnesota watersheds resolutions?
No.
Okay, hearing none. I believe that brings us to the end of our agenda. I'd like to say this is Manager Cook's last meeting with us, and we would like to wish him good health and happiness in the future. And at
Oh,
this,
Manager,
yes,
excuse me, Mr. Pedersen, let me just say this, that this may or may not be my last meeting. So, as the several sayings go, it's not over till it's over. It's not over until the fat, I'll say person sings, et cetera. And so I appreciated the opportunity to serve, but as I said, this may not be my last meeting, and also it's probably not going to be the last time that you'll see me. So
okay, at this point, I think I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Sure.
Thank you. Second,
A second.
second, and a roll
Just a
call,
second. Who's
please.
next?
Manager Duval,
All right.
and roll call.
On the motion to adjourn, Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager DeVell,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
yes.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
5-0. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.
And with that, enjoy the rest of your evening. It's beautiful outside.
I hear rumors.